Welcome to Inside Voices, a well-read magazine, Between the Pages podcast. I'm Robert Gwaltney, joined by my dear friend and co-host, Jeffrey Dale Lofton. We're both looking forward to entering into conversation today with two amazing guests, Andie Burke and Lindsay Hameroff. Andie, Lindsay, welcome.
Hi, thank you for
Hi,
having us.
thanks so much for having us. We're happy to be here.
Glad you're
Well,
here.
thank you. So before we begin, I'd like to share a little about each of you with our listeners. Andie Burke writes romantic comedies in between her pediatric RN shifts. She lives in Maryland with an alarming number of books, ultra fine point pens, dehydrated houseplants, and two small humans. Her debut, Fly With Me, was listed as one of POPSUGAR's best romance books of 2023 and AUTOSTRADDLE's best queer books of the year. Her latest book is Fall for Him and came out in fall of last year. Andie has another book coming out this fall with Stars in Her Eyes. Lindsay is the author of Till There Was You, Never Planned on You, and other love stories that make you laugh and swoon in equal measure. Her books have been listed as most anticipated by the Nerd Daily, Zibby Magazine, and other outlets, and her debut novel was selected as one of New York Public Library's best new romance books. A native of Baltimore, Maryland, she now lives in Harrisburg, PA, with her husband and two kids. If she's not writing, reading, or cleaning up cat hair, she's probably at the grocery store. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Robert. Lindsay and Andy, it was so good to be in conversation with you at the Gaithersburg Book Festival that I thought, let's talk again. And so I have a question for both of you. I really would love to hear more about how you found your way to writing.
Andy, you want to go first?
Sure. Um, yeah, storytelling has always been something that has been a part of my life since I was a little child in the 90s, sort of ferally walking through the park near my house and telling myself stories. And as I got older, I just continued. And then I was an English literature major and I kind of veered in to not really knowing what I wanted to do with that degree. And I ended up going to nursing school. And then I found just an immense amount of scope for my imagination in nursing and in healthcare and, hearing and seeing the people around me. So, and then I started writing adult novels. And then, I think everyone who's in writing knows that there's a lot of luck involved in getting an agent and getting published. But I just kept writing stories and I was really, really lucky and fortunate that someone wanted to publish one.
Great.
So, as a fellow child in the 90s, I feel like we had a very similar path. Authors always talk about like the fan fiction they wrote as kids. And I was like, I was writing Mary Kate and Ashley fan fiction. But everybody, like, I always wanted to be a writer. I didn't know like how anybody did that. Like, I was like, how do you become a published author? I just like had no idea how to do it. And like Andy, I went to school for an English degree thinking that I would get more direction there. And I didn't really. I ended up becoming an English teacher. And I actually really loved being an English teacher. I did that for 10 years. And I was home during the pandemic with my kids. And I was like, I can't just do laundry all day. Like I need to pursue something. And I still loved writing, started writing humor, like short humor. I was writing parenting humor and like pop culture humor and got hooked up with Twitter. And Twitter during the pandemic was very heavy with writers because everybody was out of work. And it was just like a mentorship program. Everyone was just like, do you want to write a book? Like, here's how you get an agent and here's how you take a course. And it was like, I really, like Annie said, it was like a lot of luck and good timing and was really excited that I got an agent and somebody wanted to read my stories.
You both
Mary?
getting
Go
an
ahead.
agent. Will you tell us a little bit more about how you did that? Because if there are writers listening, then they're probably interested in doing the same thing.
Yeah. The first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you're finding an agent who publishes what you want to write. And the best tip to do that, I would say, is to look in the back of books that you like, that you feel like books that are comparable to what you're writing and see who the agents are who are being thanked. So I made a list with that. I also went on, there's a website called Manuscript Wishlist where agents put down what kind of books they're looking for to represent. You can use like a search function to search like for your genre or like topics that you're writing about and find an agent. And agents usually on that manuscript wish list page will tell you the format that they want you to query them. I don't know, Andy, you want to add?
Yeah, I think the big thing too is just to keep writing and keep revising and keep learning how to edit your own things. And one of the best ways in terms of pitching, because I think that queries are this like mysterious thing, that it takes a lot of practice to write. And the more books I read, I kind of practiced sort of summarizing those books in my own reviews, and then I would read back cover copy. And I think that gave me a better sense of how I could pitch my own work when I was ready for it, and almost writing that pitch, that kind of what became my query almost before I even finished writing the story itself. So I understood how it would work. And Fly With Me was my 5th book that I queried before I got the agent, and recognizing that a lot of what feels like failure when you're getting rejections is really just, it's not the right time and it's not the right person. It doesn't always have to do with like your skill or what's in your query. It's so much of it is timing, so much of it is luck. So there's writers that get agents with their first book, and there's writers that don't get it for their 10th. They're writers that query for 10 years and then finally they get their yes. I had one yes. So it's a hard process of throwing a lot of spaghetti at the ceiling and hoping something sticks.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. And it only takes one yes, right? That's all you need. So Lindsay, I still can't, my ear is still snagged on the fact that you wrote Mary Kate and Ashley fan fiction.
Yeah, I did it. I wrote one. I still remember this because I wrote one in my like writer's workshop that they did in elementary school, and I wrote like a fan fiction of like the Mary Kate and Ashley movie, How the West Was Fun.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, a classic. I
Yeah,
can't decide if I like that.
It is a classic.
It is a classic. And I feel like guilty about it as an adult because I think I didn't realize at the time that my teacher did not know what it was. So she thought this was like completely original. And she was like, wow. It just like buoyed me. But like, I don't think she realized that these were like existing characters that I had created like a subplot for. But
Did you
That's
get
still
a assist from Mary Kate and Ashley?
I have not, but I did when I was writing humor. I wrote a Devon Sawa humor piece.
Oh my God.
And tagged him and he liked it. And I was like, well, my life is complete. And Casper liked my story.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, I would like to ask each of you why you write what you write. We'll start with you, Andie.
I feel like I had a good answer in my head for this question. And I think I write what I write because it's the story that comes out. And so much of my writing feels like transcribing what's in my head and experiencing it right along with the characters. In terms of why I write romance and why I write romance that has kind of some other elements of story, and there's often a grief component or something else going on in the character story, it's very important for me to show that people can fall in love at the same time that a million things in their life are kind of falling apart. And because I started really writing a lot more romance during the pandemic, that was a really important thing for me to figure out. And I'm sure like Lindsay feels this, like when you kind of go into a different stage of your career during something like a sentinel event like the pandemic, it influences a lot about what you're writing and the tone that you're looking for. And I love making people laugh, even though things are really stressful and kind of scary. And so I think that that's why I put a lot of humor in my books, even if there is a lot of like other things that are sort of more intense subplots. And Lindsay does a great job with that in her books as well. I feel like there's so many layers with her characters.
There's so many layers with your characters too. I feel like the same thing. Sorry, same thing with the humor. Like I started writing humor during the pandemic because it was like a coping mechanism. Like everything is so dark and you just like need to find the light. And I think like when I was thinking about writing romance prior to actually really sitting down and writing a book, I kept thinking about humor. Romance is like a very serious, like heavy, weighty, big emotions. And it's just like not my personality. And it just kept feeling very inauthentic when I was trying to do it. And once it occurred to me that I could write like romance that was a rom-com and it could be funny and it could be like more authentic to like the kind of personality that I have and also the kind of books that I like to read. I mean, I think we all like to write books that we are the readers for, and
Yes.
I like to read books that are like make you laugh and make you swoon, like I want all of those different components in it. So I think we end up writing like for ourselves as the target reader.
Andie, you mentioned something just now. You said that it's important to know that even when a lot of things are going on, you can like still fall in love. You can still, there are so many elements of our lives. To that point, you have, in addition to your writing career, you have a medical career. And I'm really interested about how your medical career and your writing career intersect and how that shows up in your writing.
When you work in healthcare, and I'm a nurse and I've been in pediatrics, a variety of types of specialties. I started out in pediatric transplant. I did my practicum in pediatric ICU. I work, I've done ER. I was in the ER for the pandemic and inpatient. And right now I do sedated MRIs for children who need MRIs. And I find one thing that unites all the different units that I've worked on is that we see really big moments, these kind of like big humanity moments, the best and worst of people's lives. And I've worked in the NICU with newborn babies, and I've worked in just really, really devastatingly sad situations. And I find that it shows me a lot about humanity in a very unique way to sort of be a witness to these intimate moments of people's lives. And I've noticed in certain times certain things happen or a diagnosis is given, and for the rest of that person's life that will be a pivot point. They'll think back and there's going to be a before and an after in their life. They're going to be measuring the time of their life by that event. And I find I've learned so much about just people and what we need and what we want and what's important by witnessing them. And I find that because I've seen that, it helps as I'm trying to process my own emotions about that, but also create these moments in writing, where it's a very big privilege to be a witness for those moments.
Thank you.
So the two of you, Andie, Lindsay, both first met Jeffrey at an event where you were each talking about your second novels. How would you say that your experience with your second books was different from your debut experience?
I mean, I would say a lot of my debut publishing experience was centered around learning how publishing works. Like I always joke that like I kind of thought there was going to be like an onboarding manual and there was not. So like every email I would get from my agent, she'd be like, da 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 da, it's happening. And I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, what does that mean? Like, and I so much, I mean, it was very cool and I was very excited and I loved it. But like a lot of it was tied up in like learning what these different things meant, learning what was expected of me as a writer and like learning how to promote my own book and like things like just kind of like learning the ropes. The second time around, I don't want to say I understand publishing now because I don't think any author will tell you that they understand publishing now. Like it is an unknowable, an unknowable thing. But I understood a little bit more like the basics of how this was going to go. But at that point, I'm writing my second book, but I'm also promoting my first book. So it was like different layers of responsibility. I felt like with my first one, I just kept waiting and waiting and waiting for this book to come out. And when my second one came out, I was like, oh my God, it's already publishing day. Like for that one, like that really snuck up on me because you're so busy with all the other stuff. I did feel a little bit more confident writing the second time. The first time when I was writing a book that I was querying. And this time I was like, I wasn't querying the book and I knew that it was going to happen no matter what. And that sort of took some of the pressure off. And so I was seeking out a lot less of like beta readers. I was like sticking with beta readers who I knew were going to give me good feedback this time, as opposed to just asking anybody, could you read this book and tell me what you think? Because you get so many conflicting opinions, and then you start to like question every single thing that you've written and your own voice. And so I had a little more confidence, but I was busier, I guess, the second time.
I agree. I think I also agree with you that it's easier when we don't have a million different voices influencing our voice and what we're trying to say, because we have, a publisher that is, our overlord that sort of influences what we can do. But in a good way. I've had a great experience with my publisher, but I think it is still an unknowable monster in the sense that every time I do this, there are things that I feel like a complete amateur about. And there are points in the process that, as Lindsay said too, because you're also doing a million things at the same time with other books, that makes it different every time too. But yeah, gosh, it's so exciting. No, I don't know, Lindsay or Jeffrey or Robert, any of you. It's still really nutty that we're here and our words are on the page and they're in bookstores. That magic hasn't gone away. It's still absolutely the wackiest, wildest thing. I don't know if that's ever going to go away. I'm glad it hasn't for me, but
Oh,
That's that.
something else I wanted to add is like the second time when you're writing a book, you are also reading your book having had your first book reviewed. And even if you try to avoid reviews, as I do try to avoid reviews, it's very hard sometimes. You'll get tagged in things on Instagram and you are like writing knowing that you've already been perceived. And one of the traps that I fell into the first time that I will not fall into again was I kept saying to myself, like, oh, I'll just read the 5-star reviews. But the 5-star reviews will get in your head too, because they'll say, like, I remember when I wrote my first one and it was saying, like, I love that there was like a grief element because I think like the best romance books have grief elements. And I was like, well, my second book doesn't have a grief element. Like, does that mean no one's going to like it? And should I make it more
Yeah.
like that? And you start trying to like wanting to appease people. And it's just like a dangerous road to go down. So that is like another layer of challenge.
Do you
Agree.
read your, do y'all go read your Goodreads reviews or do you stay away from
I
Goodreads?
have I have stopped. When the debut novel came out, I obsessively read them. I could not stay away from them. I can only remember the bad ones. Um, and it's just I was not prepared emotionally for reviews. Luckily, a lot of people said kind things, but there are those 1, 2 star reviews that you might get. I call them literary assassins because they don't even say anything. They just will give
Yeah.
you 1, 2 stars. They're in and out.
Yeah.
Um, oh, so it's just the worst. I did, and I'll move on quickly, but I did once have this unpublished author who hated my book so much, she wrote an entire blog post about it.
Jesus.
I
Like, why
know.
are you so obsessed with me? Like writing a terror. That I
I
mean that's
know.
but you made an impression and I honestly think that like she probably still thinks about your book and that matters, you know.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I do matter in some way.
And we'll be a fan of your second book. We'll be. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Lindsay and Andy, both of your second book, speaking of, that's the second book, they have characters that appeared in your first books. How did you expand on their smaller role in your first books to flesh them out for a full story for the second?
Um, in my case, my editor for my first book asked me if I had any other book ideas, and I was like, yeah, totally have book ideas. And then I went home to write book ideas. Um, and I knew that she loved Derek's character, and so I gave her a few stories, and she was like, "But yeah, Derek, but Derek," and so I knew that she wanted that book. So, and I knew that she loved that character, and I knew that he was a control freak. So I had to give him as much chaos as humanly possible, and it sort of informed the rest of his story, and then it just kind of evolved from there. I wish I had a better answer for like more systematic how I like webbed it out, but I don't know. It just kind of he's a sometimes, and I think Lindsay, we've talked about this too, where these characters are so fully real in our brains that
Yeah.
it's more just I feel like I'm getting to know somebody at a bar, and then like a few times into that, then I finally like know what their mom's name is. That's how it kind of feels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I had a similar experience with my editor where she was like, do you have other book ideas? And I was like, I'm just like so excited you wanted this book. Like I have no, but then I'm trying to come up with something. And I had an idea. I had this idea about like, because I was inspired from like some crazy posts I saw in like the New York Post that like inspired, like, it was like this woman had gotten a man's name tattooed on her butt when she was drunk. And now she thought maybe he was her soulmate and she was trying to find him. And like that just kind of like set the wheels off. And I had this idea about like this couple and they had gotten matching tattoos and then she was planning his wedding and like they had found each other again by accident. And she was like, I like that, but I really want Allie to have a book. And Allie was in my first book, she was like the comic relief, sassy, like side character friend. And I was like, well, she's not a wedding planner. So I had to sort of like work backwards to make her one in a way that wasn't so like trite. And but I had to like to dig into her character. She was just always the punchline in the first one. And so I was sort of like, well, like, why is she funny? Like what like I was like going back to like conversations I have with my own therapist. What are you masking with your jokes? And like why like why is humor, what you're going for? And like I knew that I wanted her to be the youngest of the family. I am not the youngest in the family, but my sister-in-law is, and she and I are really close. And I was like talking to her about like, how do you feel, that you're perceived versus like how other people perceive you, and then try to like dig into it that way. Like, how would your role within the family dictate the kind of person you grow up to be, especially in a book where there's so much family?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we
Thank you.
talked a little bit about the stress of reviews. Talk a little bit about the stress of writing under deadline.
Well,
Mm,
that'll get you.
yeah. I remember us talking about this too, Lindsay, but I find it so much easier to get away with from all the distractions and like binge write until the inertia and momentum hits. And sometimes my friends and family will do like wellness text messages on weekends because my kids are with their dad every other weekend or so. And sometimes I'll like coordinate a weekend with my girlfriend where I'm like, okay, this is like a writing weekend. And then I'll just write and write and write and write. And it allows me to be immersed in the story so that it starts to feel like that movie playing in front of my head. And then it doesn't feel, even though I'm working on a deadline, then it doesn't feel like it just feels like I'm experiencing it. And I think that that brings me back to that joy place that it happens. And it's so weird to go from um, writing a bunch of books that and feeling like a writer that would never make it, just like writing these stories that like me and my best friend appreciated, to now working on a deadline. But I do anything I can to get back into that inertia binge writing space because that's where I find so much joy.
Yeah, it is hard. I will try to put myself on like a word count deadline so that I can be like, this is manageable. Like, you can do this deadline. You know, you write 1,000 words every day, no problem. And then I'm sitting there like the same way I sit in like bar class, like checking the clock. Like, I'm just like, is this over yet? Am I done? Because like knowing that you have to do it by a certain time is, I find sometimes like so crippling. And so
Mhm.
sometimes what I'll do is like, I think because we're all doing the thing with the movie where we're picturing it, you know, and it's playing out to us. And I'm driving in my car with like a soundtrack, like playing out to the plot. And so I'll just skip ahead and write another scene that I already feel really good about. Even
I
if
do
I,
that too.
yeah, even if I end up scrapping it, like I need to chase that momentum because if I'm just writing, sometimes if I'm just writing in order and I just feel like I have to hit these 1,000 words and I am just not creatively motivated, it's so hard to keep going. But I'm like, I know I'm excited for this other scene, so I'll go and write that other scene, and then that'll sort of sometimes help, you know, bring the joy of it back.
You
Yeah,
know,
I completely agree.
Jeffrey and I support one another in our writing processes, and sometimes when we sort of help push each other along, and sometimes I'll have to text Jeffrey and insist that he write at least 200 words or I'll kill him. The right,
Names there.
exactly. And I'll call you names also.
Loving that.
This is what friends do.
I think it's really good to have a friend like that who's willing to just on threat of murder give you that initiative, yeah, impetus. Well done.
Agreed.
So I was curious why, and I've heard this, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems that women like men who are written by women. Why is that so, if in fact you agree with it?
I'm letting Lindsay start off this question.
Okay. A lot of conversations about like book boyfriends, and it's both a negative and a positive conversation. I think I was actually thinking about this today in the car, and I was like, it's really not such a binary thing. Like, it's really like a love interest thing, but book boyfriends seem to get the most conversation about it. I think in the broadest sense, people like these fictional men because of fictional men, you get to know what he's thinking, and it doesn't happen that way in real life. And this goes for like man, woman, any sort of gender, like the love interest. Anytime you like somebody, you only have the experience of living through it through your own perspective. And you read these romance novels that are a lot of times have like a dual POV, and you get to know what the other one is thinking. Like, I was reading one at the pool today, and the couple, like, they were together, but then they decided to break up because they both thought the other one wanted that. And so they weren't talking to each other, but each one of them like wanted to hear what the other one was saying. And like, as a real life person, all you get is like, they're not calling me. But in like this fictional world, you get to hear all this like longing, and it's so open. Like, men in real life, I don't think are well known for being like open books. And so it's like nice to see this like vulnerable place of, you know, getting to really, you know, see what people are really feeling, and it makes you feel connected to them.
Mm.
And then I think on the less positive note, I think fictional men are not going to hurt you the way that real life men do. Fictional men are safe, and there are a lot of subgenres in romance. A lot of them, I think, well, I know that a lot of them really like toe the line of different, like, I don't know if I said kinks, but like different sexual interests in a way that I think women feel safe to explore through fiction because they don't have to worry about a man actually doing these things to you or actually hurting you or actually being dangerous in some way. It is like a safe way to explore sexuality. It's kind of like the men that we wish that they were.
I hear you, sister.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to add, Andie?
I mean, I agree with everything that you said. I think it's just, in love, first of all, you never know what the other person is thinking all the time. So that is just, it's kind of magical that in romance we can do that with dual POV. And I've said before, I grew up Southern Baptist and I was always told like, oh, don't cause men to stumble by wearing the wrong blouse or, like that kind of thing where you not only are responsible for your own actions, you're also responsible for the actions of a man. And also your ultimate goal that I was taught was to find a man to marry. That was like all that I was taught. So the idea of the level of responsibility on my shoulders for the behavior of men around me, and also while simultaneously trying to find one, but also they were also scary because, what if I had sex with one before I was married? I think it creates this tension with women because, men are supposed to be our saviors, but they're also supposed to be like scary, and we never know what we're going to get. And I don't watch a lot of true crime or listen to a lot of true crime, but there's always that threat, like what are they going to become later on? And I think the men in romance, particularly the ones who are set as good men, they are what they claim to be. And that sometimes is its own level of like, oh my gosh, this guy's just the one he says he is. Like when he says that feels radical.
Yeah.
And so when we read men who are written by women, and in the context of romance, which again is the genre that gives its readers a promise that there will be a happily ever after at the end, we can be assured that if you are creating this good man, even if they're flawed, that they will be who they seem to be, and they will be the person who's worthy of the other main character's love in the end. And that is beautiful and not necessarily always reflected in the real life experience that women and even as little girls we are socialized to believe about men.
So, Andy, I was also raised Southern Baptist. I love the fact that you turned something bright and beautiful. You made something bright and beautiful of it in your writing. I, on the other hand, write Southern Gothic fiction. So it turned me to the dark side, I'm afraid.
That's a dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always a little awkward. Like when I was at the Lammies, I think you might have been there one year. I was at the Lammies and my parents were at the Southern Baptist annual meeting at the same
Oh,
time. So it kind of sets your life in an odd context. I don't know if your family's still religious, but
yes.
it's an interesting way to live when you write queer romance books.
I'm certain that, yes. And we can certainly, well, you know what? Do you mind expanding on that a little bit? Like, what is your relationship like with your family in that regard? Is there conversation around it?
It's it's an evolving process. I think, I live with a woman, my wonderful, wonderful girlfriend. She's the most amazing person I've ever met in my life. And I think my parents, because they are around my children, it has always been a balancing act to know how to cultivate the right relationship while maintaining the right boundaries. Because when you're raised Southern Baptist, a lot of times you're given a lot of fear and a lot about a lot of things. And my daughter, who's very precocious, she really latched onto that fear very early. So we had to create very strong boundaries for what was allowed to kind of be said and explained. And I've been very fortunate that my parents love me and love my kids as much as they do, because despite the fact that they are still full conservative, um, and have all of those Southern Baptist beliefs as heavily as anyone. They love me and love my girlfriend in their own way, which is strange, and I never would have expected it. Um, but it's still an underlying tension because you know that their faith is also a missionary type faith, so there's often an underlying not motive is the wrong, but there's, they show love in a way that they still ultimately they will always wish that I come back to the church. And that's an odd place to be, because you're just, as a child, as a, a daughter, you just want people to love you for who you are. Um, and even, me as a bisexual woman living with the love of her life, like I just want them to love me, but like all of who I am. But sometimes we just have to figure out that balance. I don't know. Maybe do you have a better answer? It's so hard.
No, I think that's wonderful, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And it is challenging. My parents still are involved in the church. I think that they've become even more religious and more devout as they've gotten older. But I've been fortunate, like you, to have accepting family and very accepting of my Timothy, which is something that I wouldn't have expected. So that certainly is a gift. Jeffrey, you were also raised Southern Baptist.
Yeah, and my experience sounds similar to yours, both of yours. The holding steadfastly to certain beliefs and the fear. There's the big fear element in the way that they see the world, and but accepting, struggling to accept as well, and trying their very best to do that. But it's been a challenge. Yeah.
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance there, and I think it's hard to hold space for
Yeah.
that, loving people while recognizing, at least, the 90s evangelical movement was a cult in a lot of respects. And that's, deconstruction is such a process for anybody who's raised in that. And having to hold space for knowing that they love you. And in their mind, showing you love is trying to get you to heaven. That's hard for people to understand. I think if you have the ethical framework of that of evangelical Christianity is very, I think, odd.
It's so well stated. Yeah.
Lindsay, so I think in a previous interview, you talked a little bit about romance not getting its due. Talk a little bit about that, and where you think that romance should lay within the literary pantheon.
I mean, I think it's like no secret that romance is not the most respected genre. No one's like, I read this incredibly beautiful novel and it was a romance. And no one is saying that. And everyone, I think it's really easy for people to trivialize romance. And just say like, it's just like, I mean, people ask me all the time, Andie, I'm sure you get the same experience. People are like, oh, you write romance, like the ones with the naked, shirtless men on the cover. And you're like, no, because it's not the 80s anymore. And it's just, people act like it's just silly. And it's ironic because it is the highest selling genre. It is carrying the entire literary industry. And it does not seem to matter how successful the books are, how successful the writers are. They're always talked down. People always talk to. I always think there was an article, I can't remember what publication it was, but Sarah J. Maas came out with like her latest book, and she has sold like millions and millions of copies. And like the headline was like, she's the queen of dragon smut. And I'm like, that's all you have to say about her. You know what I mean? Like she is like the most successful writer in the industry. She's number one on the New York Times bestseller list. And all you have to say about her is like, this is just dragon porn, I think we've talked about this in our circles before. I think the reason that romance is so not respected is if you think about who romance is written by and who romance is written for. I mean, the majority of writers who write romance are women, and the majority of consumers of romance are women. And it's not entirely the case. But it's largely a women-dominated field. And I think we are living in a society where any field that is dominated by women is going to be inherently less respected. I think that they're just like, oh, that's just a woman thing. And it's just not getting the weight or the respect of other book genres, no matter how well they do, how well they sell, how much people love them, how much there's stores opening up that are just romance-only bookstores because it's such a beloved type of literature. It just keeps getting like, oh, dragon's butt.
I
That's
think
so.
it's very insidious to the way romance is praised as well. When particular writers do well, a lot of times the accolades are always qualified. Like, oh, this is a smart romance, or such and such author is finally writing smart romance. And I find every time I see a headline like that, like my eye twitches a little bit, because people have been writing smart it's a very silly thing, but I think in the same way that we feel like we need to apologize or turn something into a quote guilty pleasure, mm, why are we doing that? And when we think about even the term like literary pantheon, when we're talking about like hierarchicalizing, there's a word there that I am just missing. Um, Creating a hierarchy where there doesn't need to be, and that these are all, these are books that people enjoy, and people love, and people find things that they can connect with, and people feel seen reading. We don't always have to make it seem like, unless it's like the smart version of something, that it's not worthy of its due as something that is a creation, a work of art that this author has created.
Agreed. If a story is good, it is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, listening to you guys talk about your upbringing too, I'm wondering if it's just something like so inherently felt that you feel like a shame that you are reading something that is discussing sexual pleasure, and that is why people want to trivialize it. I don't know if there's any like connection there where people just, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think when you look at the history of like Puritan culture and blue laws, and the way, I mean, any sort of thing that was explicit, specifically in the United States, was treated historically, I think it makes sense that we like make any sort of representation of sexual pleasure, particularly when that is more focused on a woman, into something furtive. I think it does say a lot about how society perceives women, having that role, active role.
So we are at the end of our time together. But before we say our goodbyes, I'd like both you and Lindsay to share a little bit about what's next for you.
So I actually just got the publication date for my next book. I had been on a winter cycle and they moved me to summer.
Oh,
Yeah, but like midsummer, and I was like, okay. So my third book is called Rewrite the Stars, and it's coming out July 7th, 2026.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's great.
that's so exciting. Oh, we're both star books. We'll have to do a giveaway together. My next book is With Stars in Her Eyes, and it's a sapphic bookstore romance, and it comes out in September 16th. So it's been really exciting.
Congratulations.
Wonderful. Congratulations. So, Andie, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. I'm wishing you every success in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much for having us. This was just such a pleasure and a joy to chat with you all again.
I enjoyed it too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, gentle listeners, until next time, for Inside Voices, I'm Robert Gwaltney.
And I'm Jeffrey Dale Lofton. And remember, to be creative is to be courageous. Thanks for joining us.